Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are right on time, and you guys are too. Welcome, morning, noon, and night. It is, Mary Catherine is joining us. Join us, Mary Catherine. I'm joining you from Arizona. It's 5:30 my time. It's 4:30 in the morning, Mynoo's time. So imagine that. And I just got back from Ireland, so I'm pulling it together. And we are stepping into the 12 pathways of happiness. And this will be the fourth transmission or the fourth section or path, actually, right, Mynoo? So
Yes,
everyone who's here knows Manu, I'm hoping, and if not, we will be speaking more about her later. But in the meantime, I think we shall just get to it and do it, don't you? All right.
absolutely, absolutely. And any questions, any clarifications, any sharing, do it in the chat. Uh, Sunny, if anything shows up for you, you can interrupt the flow. Okay.
Thank you.
Karen, great to see you. Are you actually dialing in from Geneva? 2:30 in the morning? Welcome, welcome. Really good to see you. Okay, so let's do this. I will remove you. Okay. Right. This particular pathway um, is just hold on a second. I am positioned in a, I do make notes for these particular transmissions, and I was just positioned in the wrong place on my document because each of these pathways is so rich that there's a lot that I have noted in the form of bullet points. So major concentration of bullet points that I'm going through here. This is the fourth transmission. And this particular pathway, it's a very important one in the context of happiness. And this pathway is all about that you have the power to make you happy. It's not just, I mean, I would even go as far as saying only you have the power to make you happy. Remember, when we began the whole series, I talked about, when I was talking about what is happiness, happiness is the decision. So, who has the power to make your decisions? Only you do. So, by that very token, only you have the power to make you happy. And literally, if I was to look at it, the greatest liberation comes on the day when we stop making other people responsible for our emotional state. And have today be that day for you. But you take complete and full accountability for your emotional state, whatever that state may be. And you'll experience that phenomenal liberation. Now, there may be ups and downs, there may be expectations that don't get fulfilled. How you choose to react or respond is up to you. That's a decision you make. And it's not always straightforward to be happy about something that you didn't expect to happen when that occurs. But it doesn't mean it actually changes your decision to be happy. You can choose to be upset about what has occurred, but having your emotional state become one of lack of happiness, that's a big decision. And that's the main thing to always remember, you know, a decision to shift your emotional state. That's a really big one. Remember, we have got 6 cylinders that we're firing on: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental. Giving accountability, giving responsibility to something else or someone else to shift any one of those states, to shift your physical state, to shift your mental state, to shift your emotional state or spiritual state, or shift your social dynamics, the state in which you show up in your social dynamics, to shift your environment. Those are very, very big responsibilities that you're giving away to someone else. And that was a big thing for me to realize, with this whole idea of, I mean, it really was, this was my exhale moment in the context of happiness. And that's why I call it the great liberation. Just recognizing that, okay, if happiness is a decision, nothing, no one, no particular circumstance can make me happy or take my happiness away. Then I choose how my experience of living my life turns out. By that token, I choose what's my next step next in the context of living my life. This is a really interesting one, and when I was working on this, I was like looking at, okay, was there a time where I felt deeply unhappy? And, you know, what did I do in that moment? Especially those moments where there was a shift that took place. And I have to say, some of the deeply unhappy moments were moments where I would go pick up my son from the childminder after work and bring him home. And he and I would be chit-chatting away in the car, this little one and me. And then we would come home and because I was then going to be cooking for him, so I had his high chair and I had his own little mini pots and pans. And, I would be talking what I'm doing and he would be copying me and stuff. It was such a wonderful, lovely moment. And then, as some of you have already heard me say, that I was in a little bit of a dysfunctional marriage, not a little bit, a seriously dysfunctional marriage with domestic violence in it. And that there would be times where my now ex-husband, he would come in and flare up about something or the other. And I would literally, because I didn't want my son to be party to that, I would literally pick him up with the high chair and just take him into the dining room so that little kerfuffle with me and my husband could happen in the kitchen. But the moment I do remember this feeling of picking up the high chair with my son and walking towards the dining room, feeling that deep sense of loss of happiness. And and at that point, um, I didn't know any different. And I would come back into the kitchen, and that this thing would continue, that the dialogue, until it stopped being a dialogue and it became a monologue from him to me. And somehow my son sort of knew something was going on, so he would either go into hysterical laughter or he would start calling out either to me or to my husband. And so that was like a pattern interrupt that would happen. So I do recall when I was looking back at this, where I experienced that greatest liberation was often that switch when I would hear my son's voice. And at that point, I just chose, no, this situation is not going to make me unhappy. I'm not changing my emotional state. And I do remember but vividly what that felt like, that feeling of liberation. The situation was still pretty dire, but I had reclaimed, I guess, my sovereignty and therefore my stance about what decision I was making in that circumstance. And it often gave me the strength to walk away from that situation and come into the dining room. So, I mean, to me, that was an example of, okay, from for anybody sensible to look at this situation, it was a time to feel deeply unhappy. But giving the power away, the responsibility for my emotional state to someone else, I could see my husband was doing it completely. He was giving the responsibility for his emotional state to the weather, which London gave you lots of opportunities, you know, or to his workplace, or to the economic environment. And he was being deeply unhappy. And then, of course, he found something or the other to do with me or the house or whatever. So, what I saw was that the reason why, when we give that responsibility for our emotional state to someone else, it is literally like we've put ourselves in a prison and thrown away the key. And then we feel really trapped and desperate, not knowing where to go because we've literally relinquished the power that we have in any circumstance. Just reconnecting to that realization is a great liberation in itself. And I would say that those moments, and they happened a few times, those moments and how my mental state switched and my emotional state switched with it. The mental state came first, where I decided intellectually, no, I'm not going to change my emotional state. At this point, I have this young being that I have brought into the world, excited about what we were going to do next, now left in a room by himself, calling out to me. And that's it. I'm responsible for my own emotional state. So, for you to really get this distinction that the greatest liberation comes when we stop making other people responsible for our emotional state. Other people could be, political leaders, senior decision makers from our client companies, members of our family, members of society, members of, um, you know, whichever organization or institution you may be part of. Sometimes we even give responsibility for our emotional state to the state of the world. I mean, can you imagine how desperately debilitating that is, where you just can't do anything about that? It's just such a huge, magnanimous problem to deal with. Even in that situation, knowing that you are the one that chooses and decides what your emotional state is going to be in any circumstance is liberating. And really, what you're doing here, what is the pathway? The pathway here is reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. That's what you're doing. There's someone that I'm working with right now, and just very young girl, and she has, when she went to a very prestigious business school, and fell in love and decided that they both decided that they were going to get married, um, and her parents were super excited about it. They got engaged, and it was a massive engagement. They spent on the engagement as much as many homes might spend on a wedding. So it was a massive engagement, but that's what the boy's parents wanted, because he's the only son that they have. And it's a very big deal in terms of having an only son and for his wedding, I guess. So everybody went along with it. Now, the mother-in-law of this girl um, is very deeply impacted by a new person who has the attention and love from the apple of her eye. So feeling very deeply threatened by it somehow. And she's coming up with a whole variety of reasons why it is the worst decision ever for the boy to get married to this girl. Now, this is after a huge engagement has already taken place, more than 4 months ago. And for no reason at all, she's coming up with one's reason or the other. And she creates a massive tantrum. Everybody's shaken in the house. The son has never seen this side of his mother. So the first time she did this, he was so shaken by it. It took him 3 months to convince them to come back and start talking again. And then since then, she's been doing it, every few weeks, having a tantrum. Until it got to a point where like there were no decisions that could be made in terms of jointly planning what the wedding would be like. There were breakdowns between her and this girl that I'm working with, her mother. And initially it was like, okay, well, we'll both take responsibility for our part. She wasn't going to. It was all the mother's fault. Um, and that was very upsetting. Anyhow, now there is, that hoop has been crossed over. So there's, they decided that the boys' side of the family said, we don't really want to work together on this thing. We're going to take responsibility for the wedding. We're going to do everything that we need to do for the wedding. So you don't need to be involved in it. So it was like, okay, fine, because we are not able to agree on anything, rather than have this very marriage be such a stressful situation, let them do that. And then whatever money that the parents of the girl wanted to spend on the wedding, they're going to give it to the couple. And but time is passing by and they're not booking the venue. None of that is happening. And the wedding is in a peak wedding season. So there is some anxiety around it. So there was, they decided to meet, the boy and the girl decided to meet the parents, the in-laws. And um, when they met, it was very beautiful. She did a big ceremony and, gave her jewelry and all sorts of gifts and stuff. Um, and it felt quite fine. And the girl was there for 3 or 4 days. Um, she decided to stay in a hotel rather than in the house because it just felt to her emotionally more secure. And then the next day, she meets her fiance, and he is very, very upset. So she asks him, and then he shares many things that his mom has said about this girl. That she doesn't carry herself well, she's uncomfortable in her own shoes, like major body shaming issues. And that they do feel that she's not the right person, and it is time for him to walk away from it. Um, for no reason at all. I mean, like there was nothing that was said or done that would indicate this. And then, this girl is going to be moving from one town to another, and therefore she was going to be given a part of the office premises of this business, this her in-law's family business, for her to set up her office. So she wanted to go and see what that was like so that she could, plan accordingly. And then the boy says, well, let's do it another time and stuff. And turns out that the mother had said to him, she's not presentable enough to our office people. So you can't take her. I mean, this girl is very presentable. She's really quite, she's really quite solid and, um, you know, charmingly beautiful. So at this point, she said, okay, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. Let us just forget all that. Let's have our time. Let's reconnect and establish whether we want to be together, because this looks like a battleground. Are we going to battle it through? Now, when I had my session with her, I was so amazed because she's implementing these pathways to happiness. She's implementing the transmutation of fear that we did a few weeks ago. That she was completely in her center, like seeing the lay of the land for the way it was. Now, the first time it happened, it took her away from her business. For nearly 4 months, she couldn't concentrate on anything. Now that she's implementing these, I could see that she's reclaimed her emotional sovereignty. What she used to break her slide into this craziness of control and bullying in many ways was she broke the pattern with the breath, breathe in and a long breath out. That brought her back into her sovereignty. And then she could get her thinking back into her center. And from that space, she was making her choices. Now she can see that her fiance is doing everything that he possibly can. But what has also become very clear to her is the mother-in-law is relentless. She is not letting go. And what has also become very clear is the reason why they took on the responsibility for the marriage 100% is because she had no intention to go proceed with it. So then that there was deep disappointment at allowing themselves to be manipulated like this. And deep disappointment is one thing. Allowing that to shift your emotional state, so then you become deeply unhappy, which is really the first domino that has a knock-on effect across any and all areas that might give you joy. She understood that distinction. So she hasn't stopped herself from feeling what she's feeling every step of the way, and even acknowledging it. And having these straight conversations that, okay, even if we do battle it through, what's become clear is they can't be living together as a joint family. If 3 hours of meeting can generate this huge situation, living together might not be the best thing. Now, that's a huge thing for her fiance to deal with, but he's come to that conclusion himself. Now, what's become clearer to him, because he's living and breathing his mom and everybody else that surrounds her, is even if they didn't live together, she is quite vengeful, which he had never seen that past side of her personality. Now, this is still work in progress. I'm sharing this story because it just shows when someone operates from having reclaimed their emotional sovereignty, they know that their happiness is their decision. And only they can make themselves happy. Now, this becomes like, a bullying, disgruntled employee that requires to be managed, and someone who is extremely important for the success of the business. So she's sort of like, being able to operate from that space and make choices and decisions. We'll see what finally emerges. But she's walking the pathway of having reclaimed her emotional sovereignty. The hidden nuance in this is that every time you surrender your emotional power to anything, your brilliance dims. If you do this for me, it'll make me so happy. You're dimming your brilliance. I feel deeply upset because that's a very big indicator, because we use it as a reason, as a justification. But just look at the word in itself, because be the cause in your matter. That's what it's calling out to you to be. So the main thing is to ensure that you remain in your brilliance no matter what. There are so many hacks that we've talked about, you know, the sovereignty breath or the stillness breath. Breathe in, long breath out. Do that 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Use your miracle lens. We'll talk more about those things in a moment. I just want to check in with you, Sunny, if anything that's showing up for you that you want to share.
Mhm. Yeah. Couple things. Happiness, what does that really mean? And I wrote down knowing why we're unhappy. What can be what is it? So how can we pivot? So for example, I was in Italy with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago just now, and then I went to Ireland, but Italy was the thing. It was very hot, as we know. It was a heat wave. And I was not happy. And I went there and spent a lot of money to go there and was looking forward to it stuff. And I thought, what is my deal? Like, I should be happy. And I think I wrote that down as our notes too. We're supposed to be happy, as spiritual people, we feel guilty if we're not happy, we're not grateful, we're not, all those things we put on ourselves. And I thought, gosh, I need to turn this around because I don't want to, I don't want to feel like this. And I realized what it was we were really living in the past in Florence and, 1400 years and all that stuff. And it was like, what's happening in Florence now? What's new and fun and fresh and stuff? And that's what I wanted to be doing. So that really helped me identify it because for a few days I was just feeling badly with myself and frustrated. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to go take a pasta class and I'm going to just do like modern things, go see fashion in Florence. So I wrote down also the ability to pivot, which is what we also could have done. We could have pivoted and gone to taken a train to the coast, and gotten out of the heat of Florence. But we just didn't pivot, we didn't think of it. And so I just wrote these different concepts down as you were talking. The
Yeah, yeah,
pressure to be happy.
yeah. I think the main thing to remember is what is happiness? Happiness is a decision, and it's a decision you make. Now, the moment you make a decision, if you don't anchor the decision in action, then it just goes by, right? So the thing about happiness is that the moment the decision of you make the decision to be happy, take the action that gives you joy. So my point about, create a treasure trove of actions that give you joy. So you can always dip into them, right? So this in itself was very clarifying for me, knowing
Hmm.
that, okay, happiness, nobody has the power to make me happy. It's just a decision. Nothing makes me happy. I just have to decide that I'm being happy and then take actions that give me joy. And naturally, that is a very regenerative sequence of choices that you make, you know. Then whether you have heat or not, it's fine.
So a
And
lot of people on your calls are very, very high consciousness and stuff like that. And, I feel like I am sometimes and sometimes not, whatever. But, I love what you're saying and I love being in that place. And sometimes I am. And as I say in this situation, sometimes I do feel that I put a real pressure on myself to be happy when I'm not feeling happy. I mean, and it may be I'm sad about something that's legit, something can be happening in my family and I'm really brokenhearted about it. I mean, I just am. And so again, I feel like the real I mean, you may not be talking about that kind of happiness or whatever, but I just feel like talking about that a little bit because I feel like that's sort of the reality of our, human condition.
yeah, even knowing that you can actually feel your emotion fully, you know,
Hmm.
whatever the situation may be. So that's why, like, being disappointed doesn't mean you're not happy. Disappointment is not the opposite of happiness, suffering is. Being disappointed about something, it's fine to acknowledge that. Suffering because you're disappointed is what actually takes you away from happiness. Feeling
Hmm.
bad, feeling upset at something that occurred that shouldn't have. Having the ability to acknowledge that I'm feeling upset about this gives you the freedom to do something about it. You know,
Hmm. To pivot.
suffering on account of being upset, that's a different thing altogether. That takes you in the realm of pain. Okay, that's the key thing. And it's
Mhm.
so physiological, right? How do you know that you're entering the realm of suffering? Physically, you feel the difference, right? I mean, this is what affects physically which organ is directly impacted by happiness or suffering decision. It's the amygdala,
Mhm.
right? Which is this tiny almond shaped thing, in the center of your brain, and is something that really feeds the response of your nervous system. you know so making the decision to be happy, leaving it hanging without anchoring it in joy, has you be open to switching to suffering quite readily. you know and the amygdala's job is fright or flight, and make sure that you know where you're at. So make sure whenever you make that decision, when it comes to suffering, whenever we made the decision to be in suffering, pain occurs naturally. It could be physical pain, it could be heart pain, it could be, whatever. Like this, that feeling of feeling pain happens naturally, right? And I've met people who made the decision to be in suffering, and they have a big, you know, chest of various things that cause them pain, right? Like in the story I'm saying, the mother-in-law clearly has made that decision on account of the daughter-in-law. When I tune into the mother-in-law, she's actually very spirited and full of aliveness in all circumstances, but it is about her. She is the center. She is on the stage. And this young girl that I'm talking about has no desire to be the center of anybody's attention, but she is the bride. So that it just so happens that on account of that, she is the center of attention. But she's also become the center of the world of her son, the mother-in-law's son. That is something that she is having to come to terms with, and is using, has made a decision to be in suffering about it. So that there's nothing that anybody can do that won't cause her pain. But if they start, you know, um, appeasing her and therefore making themselves um, depleted of their brilliance, then they start sliding into the realm of pain and suffering.
Yes.
So this is the biggest realization. When you realize it is a decision you make, you can feel your emotions fully. You can really live in the real world, you
Mm.
know, engaging with what's you could easily think, oh my God, we went all the way to Florence and we should have, gone on to the coast. Now, should have, but didn't. Now you can say, oh yeah, we should have and we didn't. And that we should have and we didn't can also become something that you regret, and you can feel silly about it. Ah, why didn't we think about it? Regret is in the realm of suffering.
Yeah. I can't stand regret. I do everything I can. That's one of
Yeah.
my feelings. And in that case, I guess the reason that I brought that up was the concept of pivoting. So when it was so extremely hot, like, it can be hot in Florence or Rome at that time, but it was a particular heat wave, as many, I'm sure you've heard about in the
Yeah,
fires and stuff.
yeah,
And it was like, okay, we could have pivoted. I mean, pivoting is a good thing. Sometimes we do get locked into something and try to be happy or try to make something be. And then sometimes it's like, it's just not working. Let's pivot. So that's the reason I brought that up because
yeah,
I'm really playing with the concept of pivoting myself in my life,
yeah,
allowing to let go and
yeah,
sometimes pivot.
yeah, yeah. It's a very good thing that you brought up because let's look at what is this point of pivot, right?
Mm,
Okay, so pivot, I mean, if you think it's a bit like that, right? You're at the top of this, where you've got to a point where a decision is called for. Okay, and if you don't, then it starts to become pointier and pointier and it hurts, right? So a decision has to be made. Now, on the one side, the decision is coming from fear. On the other side, the decision is coming from love.
mhm,
Okay. So the key thing here is when you do get to a point of a pivot, first of all, recognize this is a pivot or it is a crossroad. The different, you can stand on the crossroad, contemplate, go deep, reflect, and all of that. At a pivot, you will actually literally be thrown around, you know, and it can be very hurtful if you hang around and contemplate and reflect because now you've got to a point where a choice has to be made, right? How do you do that? Always come from having reclaimed your emotional sovereignty. That gives you the strength to make the decision coming from love. Now, focus on if I truly love myself at this point in my life, what is the decision I would gift myself with?
mm,
Don't worry about anything or anyone else. I mean, in this young girl's life, they've now got to this point of pivot because it's like, okay, here I am going to live the rest of my life, and I'm supposed to be living in this home with this woman, and I just went to see her for 3 hours, and look what a drama it's turned out to be, you know? So they have to make a choice. Now it's really getting to a point. And it's really tough because they really do love and care for each other. But they are in a culture, in an environment where, her fiance has to make some big choices, right? And for her as well, it's at a point where my guidance to her was, if you truly loved yourself, what's the choice will you make?
mm,
you know and that's all you have to say to your fiance. If you truly love yourself, don't worry about our love, don't worry about that, you know because it maybe we came together for a reason, but if you truly loved yourself, what's the choice would you make? And that's what she is also thinking in that way. And she's got to a point where she would walk away and
mm.
convert the relationship into a friendship, but walk away. Not an easy thing to be able to say with in such a straightforward way. But of course, if he actually decides that no, he's going to, move away from his family and spend the rest of his life co-creating a life together, then she won't walk away. But once you understand it, you're at a pivot. Look, sometimes people think that they are at a pivot. They're not. They're just at a crossroad. Do we hang around in Florence, or do we, go somewhere else? Because there is quite a lot of magic in Florence, you know.
Yes.
Right? So, okay, it's a crossroad. But the being distressed by the weather and kind of constantly dialoguing about how this weather is really, upsetting our vacation and our experience, and I've spent all this money. Now you're entering the realm of suffering. You've made a choice. And then you make a choice that, oh, let's just leave Florence. Let's just go to go to the coast. Now that's a decision coming from fear. A decision where you might have said, okay, there's a great magic in Florence, but I'm finding it very hard to enjoy that magic in this heat. So I choose to go to the coast instead and experience that part of Italy and
Mm.
come back to Florence another time.
Yeah.
That's a decision coming from love,
Mm. Yeah.
you know? So when you make a decision coming from fear at a point of pivot, you remain in suffering. If
Mhm.
only I had known. I mean, all that stuff starts to happen. So you brought up some really useful points.
As I like to do.
Yes. Okay. So I'll continue. So once you accept that only you can make yourself happy, what can you expect? Where would you see the impact? Instantly, your relationships transform because dependency dissolves. Codependency, which is so common in relationships, particularly relationships where there is great love. Codependency is pressuresome, burdensome, heavy. And codependency is where these relationships are open to and have the propensity to um, seek validation, feel entitled. I've seen people be so upset at the state because it is not providing them with the adequate level of benefits, or you know or be really really angry at their local council because they've asked them to segregate their waste. But it's like, you're what happens is when you don't choose that you are making the decision to make yourself happy, you're floating. Anything and anyone can step in and make you unhappy because you've got that relationship of codependency with your external environment, which is somehow more powerful than you are. And when you're floating around in that way, where you've like relinquished your emotional sovereignty, your mind is on hyper alert because so many things, anything and everything, has the capability of upsetting you or hurting you. So your mind is hyper alert, your thoughts start to spin very readily. And when thoughts spin, they're creating meaning. You enter the realm of anxiety. Anxiety multiplies, becomes stress. Stress multiplies, makes you feel helpless. Helplessness multiplies, makes you feel hopeless. You enter the realm of anguish. You stop expressing yourself. You're in the land of depression. Happiness is a very happy and easy way to reclaim your emotional sovereignty. The happy hormone, they say, right? Because why is happiness such a so powerful? Because it does affect your amygdala. Amygdala has a direct impact on stressing your neurons and therefore your entire nervous system, or calming it. So it's one of those things. I was having this discussion with my sister yesterday, and I was saying to her, how I say, um, create treasure troves of actions that give you joy. Create a treasure trove of what it is that you can be grateful for. And just know these treasure troves have got infinite capacity. But what it means is if at any point in time your amygdala is stressed on account of something shocking that might have occurred, you can dip into any one of those treasure troves and then bring that calm back. Because the amygdala is a very physiological object, which has a very physiological impact, the breath is a very important and easy access to start calming it down. Breathe in, a long breath out. So, unbeknown to me, I've now got a treasure trove of hacks that interrupt a variety of patterns, that impact the amygdala. The secret to improving and then transforming any relationship is the dissolving of dependency. Sometimes we are dependent on the relationship itself, and that's codependence. You are pressured, the other person is pressured. If you feel you're walking on eggshells anywhere, be it in terms of your relationship to your investors or your donors or your stakeholders or people that you care and love about, people that you serve, your customers. If there is eggshell walking going on anywhere, you somehow have got codependency going on, you know, and you can be analytical about where that is, not the best use of your time when your amygdala is already stressed because your nervous system is already on the edge. The moment you recognize eggshell walking is happening, choose, make a decision to be happy, go into your treasure trove of actions that give you joy, and then come back to the situation. The cost of not reclaiming your emotional sovereignty, the cost of tolerating that, others or other situations control your happiness, the cost is that you land up living under emotional dictatorship. Dictatorship, the innate vibration of dictatorship is command and control. It's anchored in command and control. Having your emotional state commanded and controlled, living under emotional dictatorship, here there isn't one particular person. In any particular situation, it may be one person or it may be a particular situation that you may be allocating it to, but you are living under emotional dictatorship. That person goes away and does something positive, someone else will show up because you've chosen to allow yourself to continue living under emotional dictatorship. Just checking in with you, Sunny. I mean, this was huge, for me to also examine, which times in my life I've actually felt that I was living under emotional dictatorship. This phrase in itself was like just literally hit me between the eyes, like it was a wake-up phrase.
Yeah, I think that we can just keep going, but that feeling again, uh, I just remember one time with children, it's such a great example to watch children. I was working many years ago with a woman who was demining some different areas of our world. And she had an event where, there were children who were playing, and she had kind of a mock situation where kids were running through like a tape, and my son, my little son at the time, was one of them, and it just broke me into tears because it was like, they were just in joy in this place, or the children playing soccer in areas where it might be a kind of a death area. And so again, it's perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, very true, very true. The reward, of course, when you get that only you can make you happy, but that's why I call it the greatest liberation, um, is freedom. How do you know that you're on track? You are naturally regenerating actions that give you joy. And your joy really survives and sometimes even transforms some of the most difficult conversations. So there are times where I've had people say, look, something so difficult is impacting this particular family, and I'm with them, and you're saying I should, that I should stay on my decision that I've made to be happy and seek out actions that give me joy. How can I do that? Isn't it insensitive? Well, it's hard. The fact that you can be fully present and allow the other person to express wherever they are at without being judged, without having to receive someone else's communication back, is actually an action that you will find will give you tremendous joy because you connect to your presence. You also realize that you can be in the most difficult of circumstances and not lose your joy. It gives you an understanding that you can experience life fully without losing yourself or becoming a part of what is going on around you, the good, the bad, or the ugly, or the beautiful. And you know you're on track when you're able to operate this way. The bottom line is no one has the power to make you happy. Only you have the power to stop yourself. Only you have that power. So if I was to sort of, as we get towards the end of our session today, if I was to leave you with one question, I would say, ask yourself, who have you given the remote control to? Who determines whether you have a good day? Is it a spouse, a partner, a parent, a colleague, client, stranger on social media per se, email, bank balance, weather? If someone else can steal your peace, if someone else's words can determine your worth, if someone else's behavior can dictate your happiness, then you've handed over the most precious gift you were ever given, your sovereignty. The world does not need another person who's emotionally hostage to circumstances. The call is for men and women who are able to stay in their center, who are able to remember grace and gratitude and therefore experience peace in chaos, compassion in conflict, feel certain in uncertainty. Be joyful even when life does not go according to plan. That's not denial, that's mastery. Every moment you blame another person or another circumstance for how you feel, you give away that piece of your freedom. Every moment you reclaim that power, your brilliance shines even brighter. So, my invitation today is to, make a decision. Stop waiting for someone to apologize, for someone to understand you. Stop waiting for life to become easier. Choose your happiness. you know, be in a state of gratitude. It naturally anchors and protects your peace. Activate joy, not because life is perfect, because you have finally remembered who is in charge. Because the moment you reclaim your emotional sovereignty, you stop surviving life and you begin leading it. The greatest prison really has no walls. It is believing that somebody else holds the key to your happiness. Today, take it back. You have the key. Over to you, Sunny, to complete our session today.
Whew. Finding a way to be happy these days through so many different aspects of health and family health and so many ups, just chaos. Sometimes I know that we feel like we're in a popcorn popper, and to be able to find our center, our core, and allow that and to allow that for people around us, I think is such a powerful thing. And so I really, really appreciate, Minu, that we've been talking about this. And I know we've been talking about it for a bit, and we shall continue next week. Is that true? Yes.
Absolutely.
And
There
so
are 12 pathways to happiness. I mean, how cool is that,
that's right. I guess we have a few more. Yay. I should be tuning in because, there have been many years in my life where it just was always about happiness. There was nothing that ever penetrated that happiness. And
Yeah.
these days I feel, a little more vulnerable. So I shall be tuning in for the rest of our pathways. So thank you guys for joining us, and we shall be here next Bat Channel next Thursday or Friday morning or whatever it is for you. And again, Minu, I really honor you, especially getting up so early and looking so lovely. I don't know how you do it, but thank you all for being with us. And we will see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye bye. And thank you
Bye
to our
bye.
Europeans for having woken up so early to join us. Thank you. Bye.